Welcome into the July 15th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. On today's show, we're going to be chatting about a couple of the Maple Leaf signings that they made last night, adding some depth to the blue line. Mitch Marner held his fourth annual Marner Assist Fund charity event last night. We'll talk about some of the main things that came out of that, as we had a bunch of current and former Maple Leafs stop by and speak with the media. And we'll hear from Kyle Dubas as well. From a couple of days ago after free agency, hear what he had to say about day one of free agency. All that more coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. You can also now catch us up on YouTube to watch us via video format. Just go check us out, Locked On Leafs on YouTube, and please hit subscribe. Let us know down below in the comment section if you are joining us on YouTube your thoughts on the new signings. Jordie, Benn, and Victor Mete inking new one-year league minimum deals to join the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we'll start there. We'll also get into what happened at the Marner Assist Fund last night, and we will hear from Kyle Dubas. So, Dave, Jordie, Benn, and Victor Mete. You want to start with Jordie, Benn, because I think, I guess I'll basically start with Victor Mete. Victor Mete, to me, is very much a tweener at this point. NHL, AHL guy. He might be a Marlies type of player. They already had 6 guys above him on the depth chart. I would put Jordie, Benn above him on the depth chart. And then once Rasmus Sandin, or if he signs, I would also put him on the depth chart ahead of Victor Mete. So, to me, he's kind of a tweener type of player, AHL, Marlies type guy who will be able to come up and fill some gaps if some injuries occur. Is that your understanding of Victor Mete, or do you have my higher expectations?
I don't personally. Yeah. I just think that this is just adding some bodies that you know, a couple of injuries to a couple of defensemen, and then you got to find guys that can step up. And so, I think the Marlies also need some bodies too, right? There's a lot of younger, unproven defensemen down there, and so, you know, Victor Mete has that AHL experience, and yeah, that's pretty much all it is. Even Jordie, Benn, like, he's most likely higher than Mete on the depth chart, but I'm not expecting him to figure into a regular role on this team at all. So, like, I'm not going to really criticize a depth signing unless there were better options out there, which if you look at the defense market, it ain't that great. There's not really much out there that if the Leafs are going to try to improve on their current top 6, it's going to have to come, I think, most likely via trade. I think that's going to be the most likely outcome there.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I mean, I don't see them being in the market for John Klingberg. Nope. They just can't simply afford it. I think we all know that. But yeah, you're right. Neither of these two are going to move the needle. I don't think any of these guys, unless there's massive injuries, are going to see regular time with the Maple Leafs this season. I could see Jordie, Benn being like the team's 7th defenseman, just kind of being around, because he is that guy who has a little bit of bite. And we heard Kyle Dubas the other day. We'll play the audio in a little bit. We're going to play you the full 15-minute press conference that he had coming off of day one of free agency. But what he did say was, we're still looking to add and probably look to add someone who can kind of fill Ilya Lyubushkin's role, more of a right shot defensive defenseman who's got a little bit of grit and depth. And that's kind of what Jordie, Benn can be. Like, he's a left shot, but he can play both sides. And, you know, he's definitely a dude with jam, right? The brother of Jamie Benn. They both probably grew up dropping the mitts, playing mini sticks all the time down in the basement, it seems like, because they both got a little bit of jam to them, which I like. But yeah, these two players, like Jordie Benn, I could see being like the seventh, eighth defenseman on the roster. I don't envision him being like, yes, I will come and play for the Marlies, but he'll compete for, at least a roster spot with the Maple Leafs. Where Victor Mete, I could totally see him being waiver fodder who, goes and it would take a couple injuries for him to come up. But that said, a couple injuries occur. I much prefer Victor Mete over, like what we saw last year. We saw Carl Dahlstrom have to come up and play some games, and we saw Alex Biega come up and play. Like I at least Victor Mete is like 230 NHL games in his career, and he's played a lot. He's not like an overly skilled player. Like he's a small guy, 5'9", 185, local kid from the bridge. But last season, 37 games with the Ottawa Senators, 0 goals, just 7 assists, a -19. But it's the first time he was ever a minus player, actually, in his entire NHL career. But
to be fair, how many Senators players were a plus player last year?
Yeah, not a whole lot. Probably none, to be honest with you. I could actually check and tell you that answer in a sec. There was Drake Batherson was a +4, Artem Zub a +1, Nick Holden was even at 0, and that might be it. That's pretty much it. Pinto,
That's more than I expected.
Yeah, so not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. That's impressive for Artem Zub. 81 games to somehow be a +1 on the on that team.
Should have won the North just based on that stat alone.
Probably should have. But yeah, so I'm not expecting a whole lot out of these signings. They're depth signings. That's what they are. They're depth, and you always need it. Injuries are going to occur throughout the season, and you want to make sure that you have NHL bodies, NHL quality bodies who can fill in, so that you're not just kind of saying, okay, let's toss out Rubens and see what happens. Let's toss out Dahlstrom and see what happens. Let's, Mac Hollowell, go get her, son, and see what happens. So at least they have guys, warm NHL bodies who have a ton of talent, and in Jordie Benn's case, has the versatility to play both sides. Mete a lefty, but Ben can play both sides, and he's got jam. I think I saw 50 hits in like 37 games last year. Likes to block shots as well, so he can kill penalties. So it's a not a bad signing to have, especially a guy that you just have as part of your depth going forward.
Yeah, and he played for the Minnesota Wild, so like he played for a decent team last year. It's not like he's coming from, a team that was a bottom feeder. So,
yep. So that's that. The thing that I'm wondering is like how much longer before we hear about Rasmus Sandin? Because now that's 7 or 8 defensemen under contract with the Maple Leafs, and Sandin's not one of them. And how many defensemen are they going to carry on their roster? Right? Like if we think Jordie Benn came here to be part of the Maple Leafs and not the Marlies, which I would assume that's the case. I don't think that guy plans on going back down to the minors at 35 years old. One of two things: either they're going to carry 8 defensemen on the roster, which is something we haven't seen the Maple Leafs do in a very long time, because, well, quite frankly, they rarely carry 23 men on their roster, and they can't really afford to do it. Or once they sign Sandin, or perhaps Sandin gets moved, but there might be a move in store for defensemen. Am I reading into that a little bit too much, Dave, you think? Or do you believe that could be the case as well?
It's tough. We always think that the Leafs are going to go get this guy, but then it's like you hear Kyle Dubas kind of say, well, we have cap constraints and just couldn't, there's certain things we could and couldn't do. But I do think, like, when you look at this defense, the right side looks like it needs a little bit of work. So I would assume that there's got to be something going on there. Like, this is a case where I just, like, Justin Hall being, like, where's Justin Hall going to play? Like, where does he slot in for next season, right? And and I've heard this quite often, is where does Rasmus Sandin even really slot in if he is brought back, right? If Justin Hall's here, like, on the left side, you got Giordano, Muzzin, and Riley. Like, is he going to beat up one of those guys? Like, is that the plan for him, for the Leafs to pretty much tell him, pick, if you're going to try to make it on the left side, you got to beat up one of these guys. I just don't know what the plan is there. And I think that's maybe where Rasmus Sandin, I think that's probably what's taking so long for him, is he probably looks at it the same way that we do. And he's just like, where do I fit into the plan here? And like Kyle Dubas has constantly said, you are the future. He is a part of the future, just like Timothy Liljegren. It's kind of hard to see that when the roadmap to get a regular spot in the NHL is a lot tougher on the left side than it really is on the right side. And how comfortable is he to play on the right side? Like, he says he's willing to do it, but is he willing to do it just to try to make it into the NHL? Like, is that going to have to be the compromise for him? I don't know if that's what he would want to do.
Yeah, I think like he did it a little bit last year. We saw, and kind of mixed bag in terms of success there. But I don't think he could do it up the lineup. I think he could do it on a third pair quite fine, I would assume. But we saw what it looked like when he and Morgan Riley ended up pairing up for that one game.
Yeah.
It didn't go well, and after the game, Sheldon Keefe said, "Yeah, never doing that again." So you can already kind of take that out of the equation. So then, what are you going to put him with Muzzin? You trust Rasmus Sandin as a shutdown defenseman in as a shutdown role? I'm not so certain I agree with that either. So now you're looking at the third pair, but then it's like, okay, so then Timothy Liljegren is getting thrusted into either the top pair or the shutdown. It really is interesting how the defense shakes up. And I agree with you where I think they probably do need to make one move to go out and get themselves a stabilizing top four defenseman to play with Morgan Riley. I think either a guy to play with Riley, or I guess someone who could also help kind of elevate Muzzin's game the way that we saw happen in the playoffs alongside TJ Brody, or just play Brody there and find Morgan Riley a partner. Like I think that would be the best case scenario for this offseason, but easier said than done. I've always liked Connor Murphy as an option, and it looks like Chicago's taking it down to the studs. So maybe Sandin, you can float him out there and try and get Connor Murphy, locked in, and that's kind of a guy you could throw into your top four. Right shot, big frame, rugged, kills penalties, eats minutes. I like that a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what they end up doing with the blue line. Mitch Marner had his assist fund gala last night. We'll get into that in just a moment. Then we'll also hear from Kyle Dubas and his thoughts on how day one of free agency went for the Toronto Maple Leafs. All that coming up shortly. But before we get there, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors. That's BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports development, league reviews, and news. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, include live betting, esports, and scores. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, golf, and Major League Baseball. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. You got Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti, your hosts of the show, here with you. So, not sure if you got a chance to hear a lot of the interviews that were taking place last night at the Marner Assist Fund Gala last night, the charity event that he held, the fourth time that he's had this one, which is really awesome. And it seems like there's so much support from current and former teammates. I mean, you had so many guys that were there, and Jack Campbell was here, even though he signed in Edmonton. He flew back into town, so he was here. Jake Muzzin was here. Nick Ritchie was around. Anthony Cirelli was here, who has ties to Marner, or maybe just local kids grew up playing together. So lots of support. The captain, John Tavares, obviously, lots of support for Mitch Marner. But One thing that to be honest, it's not that I forgot that it happened, but I didn't anticipate the media to open up about it and ask him about it. But remember when he was involved in that carjacking
Yeah.
earlier this offseason? Um, so he opened up about that and quite, didn't,
Candidly.
yeah, quite candidly.
Yeah, just to hear him kind of discuss the mental health aspect of it. Like, I thought that when he put out that statement and like the Leafs kind of addressed it, that we wouldn't really hear about it again.
Yeah,
And to hear him talk about it, and like part of the the focus of the Marner Assist Fund this year is on mental health and helping those dealing with mental health. So I actually applaud him because the best way to kind of help, I mean, in my opinion, find some of the best ways to help those dealing with mental health is kind of discussing your own experiences, and it kind of helps those kind of realize that other people, even $1 million athletes, go through their struggles. And like, this was like, if you read like the details of this carjacking, like there were like four guys that like like that approached them, and like that it was a very surreal experience. Like, it didn't surprise me to hear that there was some residual impact, but also the realization of how important it is to have resources to help people in these situations. And like, I think I commend him a lot for making that, a big part of his address when he was discussing that.
yeah, I completely agree. So good on Marner, not only for coming out and using using that story to also address like some mental health issues, but also just the gala as a whole. Um, some other interesting things that came about it. Obviously, with a whole bunch of Maple Leafs there and former teammates, people asking about what went down in free agency and the offseason so far. John Tavares asked about Matt Murray and his thoughts on him. I didn't expect him to go out there and bury the guy, anyways. I expected him to be very flowery in what he said about Murray, but big fan of his playoff pedigree. A guy who got 2 cups, the classic uh, love that Matt Murray seems to be getting from a lot of people from Toronto. But something else that he mentioned, he says he's been skating and feels lighter. John Tavares feeling lighter, feeling good out there. The legs feel good when he's doing his skating throughout the summer. Do we not hear this from every single
Yeah.
player, every single offseason? I feel better than I ever have before. I feel like this is gonna be my best year. I hope this is the case, but like, just not buying it, man. Unfortunately, I wish I could. I wish I could, but just not buying it.
Yeah, I'm not going to hear John Tavares say, you know what? I've been really packing on the pounds this summer, letting myself go, and I'm feeling it on the ice. So I don't expect it to say that, and like, maybe he is realizing that his game has been slow, and so he needs to find a way to get quicker. Like,
Not
it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case, but yeah, like, I'll believe it when I see it in game action, and when it comes to him trying to live up to that $11 million contract, which a lot of people believe. Well, a lot of people are saying that he has not so far, which I would kind of say this year has been or this past season was the one that was the eye opener, and I think maybe for him it was too. So
How do you feel about, like, at what point do you think he gets moved to the wing? I was having this conversation with Jonas Siegel yesterday of The Athletic, and he's a little bit more on board. Like, if they could find someone to replace him in the 2 hole, whether that's moving Willie into the middle or if they find somebody, I was thinking maybe Dylan Strome, but he obviously signs a deal with Washington, so that's
damn Washington.
but like, what about a Paul Stastny? You bring in a Paul Stastny, maybe he could potentially do something and come in and allow Tavares to play the wing a little bit. I know Stastny ended up playing the wing for most of the time last year, but I don't know. I feel like it could open up his game a little more, and you could get some more scoring out of him if you take some of the center duties away from him, and he just focuses on being an offensive threat in the top six, and perhaps that's a way to try and get it done and help maximize the potential of a John Tavares is to move him to the wing and just get him scoring goals again. I think that would be beneficial. That said, in order to do that, they do need to have like a guy who can fill in as the number 2 center. I'm not sold Kerfoot's that guy.
Mhm.
So they would have to find somebody in order to make that happen, I think.
Yeah, like the thing is with John Tavares' game, he's not a speed. He's never been known for his speed, and where the point you have to consider really consider the move from center is when defensively he's not able to cut it as a center, right? That's usually when you see teams transition guys away from the middle. Like William Nylander got the speed, got the skating, but the defensive awareness just isn't there for me to say, all right, let's get Willie as that center. It could change, but I think that's probably where the Leafs are with that potential. With Tavares, the other thing too is his game is based on, possession, right? Cycling. So they just need to find guys that can help him in that regard. And, maybe they find somebody, a winger, like almost like what Ilya Mikheyev brought, that speed and defensive ability, right? And that'll kind of help him in that regard so that he's not always the guy that has to, bear all the brunt defensively. You can do it that way too, but yeah, Dylan Strome was obviously the guy that we talked about a lot, and we were really hoping the Leafs could get. But at $3.5 million, it seemed like you know there was a lot of teams interested, as Elliot Friedman reported. So he was going to get a bigger ticket. I think the Leafs were looking to sign. So I
I don't know. I what I
three and
assume
a half, I would have done it for
that's
$3.5 million
that's
for
what I thought the
yeah,
Leafs would have had to pay to get him anyway. So I wasn't
yeah.
surprised by that number.
But like that, but that's always been kind of the case where like we think the Leafs should go out and get a guy like that, but then you see $3.5 million, and it's like, well, yeah, it looks like the Leafs just weren't willing to pay it, or Dylan Strome looks at the Capitals and say, I like the opportunity there, maybe a little bit more than what the Leafs could have potentially have offered. Um, that could certainly be the case. I mean, we haven't heard from Dylan Strome yet, so and I'm curious to see if maybe somebody does ask him about other teams that he would have considered going to. But
Yeah,
yeah,
probably not even going to talk about it. There.
Kerfoot. The other thing about Kerfoot, I want to bring this up too, is that he has 1 year left on his contract, and I don't see him around after this year because he's a guy that could get paid decent coin to be on a team because of the versatility he provides. So if you're the Leafs, do you want to go into the season kind of with him as your own rental, or use him to go and get yourself maybe somebody that's a little bit younger, or somebody that maybe has a future that could have a future on this
I
team?
mean, if I'm the Maple Leafs, like I'm definitely calling around to see what interest is there in Alex
Exactly.
Kerfoot. And 100%, Tim. He was just paid a bonus on July 13th of like 1.9 million or 95 million, which means the rest of his salary for the season is only 750,000. And
Yeah.
at a $3.5 million cap hit, only $750,000 in actual salary that needs to be paid out. That's very attractive to some internal cap teams, and you could get an asset for that because he's an NHL player, right? Like he's the problem with Kerfoot is he's not a top 6 guy on a championship team, but he
Yeah.
can give you effective top 6 minutes. I think on a medium, middle of the pack to lower end team, right? I think he can give you effective top 6 minutes. Perhaps Chicago. Maybe they just need bodies, so that could be.
Yeah.
If they make some sort of deal, if they would be interested just in that NHL warm body like an Alex Kerfoot, it's not going to cost a lot, but it'll get you to the floor. Potentially, that's something that could work out, or whatever other team there is around the league. But yeah, I would prefer to utilize the cap space that is being used up on Alex Kerfoot and kind of reallocate that elsewhere, whether that is on a top 4 blue liner, or that is on a actual top 6, scoring winger
Yeah.
potentially. So yeah, I'm with you there. Where I'm looking at Alex Kerfoot and thinking would be nice if that contract could get off the books, and I don't think it'd be overly difficult. I think that he would garner a return. It wouldn't be a cap dump. I think you can get an
Okay.
asset for him, especially given the way the contract is structured. Um, you want to get to Kyle Dubas?
Let's get to Doobie.
All right. So Kyle Dubas spoke after, Wednesday? Yeah, after Wednesday, day one of free agency. Kyle Dubas spoke to the media on the plethora of moves that he made. Samsonov, Abe Kubel, Adam Gaudette, and then I think Malgin actually came in after he had signed. So he doesn't touch on Malgin, but then touches on, there's still some more that we want to do. He went out afterwards and brought in Malgin, Benn, and Mete. And then he also spoke for the first time on the Matt Murray situation as well. So we're just going to play the full 15-minute press conference for you guys so that you can hear everything that he had to say, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Obviously, a number of transactions over the last several days. Matt Murray from Ottawa, Ilya Samsonov signed as a free agent from Washington. In addition today with Adam Gaudette and Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and then the obvious departures from our organization. We're thankful for the efforts of Jack Campbell, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Ilya Mikheyev over the last several years. Obviously did a very nice job for us and were rewarded well elsewhere. So we're very happy for them and look forward to continuing to move along here. So I'll open for questions.
The difference in pay between Jack, AAV-wise, I know term is different, but
yeah.
AAV-wise, it's not that great between Jack
Sure.
and Matt. What's the difference in your mind?
I think the difference is, as you alluded to, would just be the term. As we got through and evaluated, we knew very clearly from Jack's representatives what the combination of terms and dollars would look like, and for us, we thought it's a 28-year-old goaltender coming in, which was the same age I think Jack was when he came in here, and a 28-year-old goaltender with that pedigree. Obviously, I think everyone knows, and Matt would acknowledge himself, not a great finish in Pittsburgh, and the first year in Ottawa. The things that were, for me, the determining factors were, number one, his pedigree, but number two, and more importantly, I think, in the short run, the way that he performed once he came back up from Belleville there before getting injured at the end of the year. So showing the signs of the goaltender that he's been in the past. And it's a 2-year commitment with him and a 1-year commitment with Ilya. They're both young enough that we will give them the runway here and see if they can become the long-term solution in net. But we also have our own young goaltenders coming and on the way. So we're hopeful that over the course of the next 2 seasons, starting with this season here, that these guys can all push themselves and begin to run with it here for us.
How much did cup experience come into play with signing guys like Aube-Kubel?
I think that it's nice, and it's great that he's gone through that as a key member of that group, David. But to me, I think Sheldon really felt that he could add a lot with losing Ilya's speed. Nicholas provides that, a lot of it, and forechecking, pressure, able to get up the ice. He can, shown in major junior and also in the American League and in the NHL start. If he has time and space, he can also shoot, and so we'll look to continue to work with him, bring him along. Obviously, a good season with Colorado, and the cup experience, I think, always helps. How much, I'm not sure every single year, but you'd rather have it than not.
What's the personal connection with Matt Murray mean to you?
I think that I think gets a little bit overstated a bit, Lance. I mean, I know what he's about, and I've seen him in challenging moments, but at a much different level a long time ago. I think the things that override all of that for me are what he did in Pittsburgh, 5 years ago, and then the way that he played this year in the back half of the year to kind of show that that's still there. I think knowing the character of the person always helps, but and having a previous experience with him always helps. But if not for that pedigree and what he's accomplished and what he showed, that it wouldn't be a fit. So there's lots of players that I know in the league from my time with the Sioux or with the Marlies or here that just aren't fits, and we deem Matt as a fit.
Both Ilya and Matt have been starters in the league before. Do you have a sort of an idea as to who you think might be the guy that is the primary starter, or is that still open to competition?
It'll be wide open to competition. We'll give them both a good run here, and our hope is that both play well as they can, and we'll get to work with them here mid-September and get them rolling. But I think that'd be a great thing for us if both of them play the way that we think that they can.
You guys did due diligence the most about Ilya?
Samsonov?
Yeah.
I think he's very young. Obviously has a great pedigree and had great potential. I think just in going through his situation and speaking with with his people here today and getting to learn about it a little bit, he seems very highly motivated. And the thing that stood out to me, Josh, more than anything, was that he was, he really wanted it to be a 1-year kind of show me, bet on yourself type deal, which is not always common with players coming off of the shock, I think, of being non-QO'd when he wasn't expecting it. And so that was impressive to me, combined with the evaluation of our player personnel department and goaltending department of what he can become if we can work with him and get him on the right track.
Outside of signing your own RFAs, do you feel like you're done now, or do you think you're going to be looking at a second wave of guys?
No, I think we've got the ability to continue to look and see what the best fits are going to be as the market kind of begins to dry a little bit, and we have our own flexibility and different things that we can do. We have space, we have roster spots that are still available for really all different kinds of players. We'd like to add another depth piece on defense, and up front it's very flexible in terms of what we can add there. So I don't think that we're done. I think we're certainly open to depth on D, and then certainly really any combination of players up front. But we'll just see how things shake out. They're obviously going to have to be guys that look at our situation and say, I can go there for a year or two on relatively low dollars, and the group would be a fit for me to have success, and then parlay that into something greater.
Are you exploring the trade market at all still, or?
Everything's wide open. We're always exploring the trade market. I mean, that's the part of the job, and I think that's a little bit on the back burner today at the start, but then probably pick back up as it goes.
You guys did your due diligence with Murray in terms of his medical situation. What gives you confidence that he's going to be able to stay healthy here moving forward?
Yeah, we were able to actually, Ottawa was great, and Pierre, we were actually able to have him come in and go through a full run of his medical situation with our medical staff and performance staff. So we felt pretty good about where he was at with that. I think with any player, there's always a risk, and any player that's had injuries in the past, that risk is, there's no reason to dance around it. It's always greater. But in his situation, we were able to bring him in, which is not common at this time of year, and get a full rundown on him. And we feel good about where he's at and the work that he's putting in to make sure that he stays in that condition.
What do you like about Adam?
He's someone that we played against him a lot. He was in Vancouver there, and then obviously went to Chicago for a short stint, then Ottawa this year. He's, especially when he first came out of Northeastern, he was excellent at Northeastern. Then when he came out with Vancouver, he had that over 30 points in 50-some games. And he's had a few years where it's not gone as smoothly for him. I thought at the World Championships for the U.S., he really showed that form that he had when he first came out from Northeastern, and looked to be confident again and empowered a little bit with Team USA. So we were, it's one of these bets that we make a few times every summer, and he seems very ambitious to get to work. Just in speaking with him today and doing the background on him as we got set and talking to people that he's trained with and such, he's certainly, we learned he had a bit of an illness that caused him to lose a lot of weight. He's got that figured out now, so he's stronger than ever, and we just think it's a guy that we can work with here and see what happens.
When there's so many guys who are just not qualified, does that help with teams that are kind of cap-struck, that they're younger guys that are willing to take maybe a little bit lower to bet on themselves again and turn that into something else?
I think there's a combination of it, Dave. I think one of the things that also helps here is other players I've seen, guys, whether they've been free agents or they've been in it, like if you go back last year, like a Kampf and Bunting, that came in and had some success, but then also we brought Bush in that Arizona trade with Richie, and he comes in and plays well, and I'm real happy for him. That he was able to find a good spot, and Buffalo would be a great fit for him with as they continue to come along with their young D. So it's for us. I find that it's becoming a situation. I think it's really just because of the players that they can play with here, that they look at it and it's enticing for them. So I think that certainly helps. Where whereas in the past, when the cap was steadily climbing, there was more dollars readily available for free agents that could be paid what they felt they were going to get when they walked into the marketplace.
Are you close at all?
Shape kind of the fourth line ahead?
Well, I think so. I think we want it to be really effective. Jonas, we've got all different types of guys. We obviously got Clifford and Simmons returning, but you also have Joey Anderson and Nick Robertson and Curtis Douglas and Bobby McMahon and Pontus Holmberg pushing from the minors. Now you add Obe Kubel today and others that are in that mix to be there. So, we would like it to be a line that can be heavily relied on for us like our others, but more physicality, more competitiveness, and drive the play down the ice and be relied upon for Sheldon that way.
Close to 25% retention from Matt Murray, maybe not more.
That was what we agreed on with them. That was seemed to be the common thing that they were able to do when in all the discussions they were having on Matt. So we'd love to have pushed for more and done a better deal, but it was either make that deal or move on elsewhere, and we elected to make the deal.
Did you try to get a third team involved?
Bush and Blackwell?
No, I wouldn't say so. No. Either.
Did you try to get a third team involved to take another 25?
I think, as you see today, and we've gone through in the past, the cost of doing that to us would outweigh the entire state of affairs, especially on a 2-year deal with that. It's heavily backloaded in cash. So we look at that and we've been involved in a lot of those deals, both for and against. And the cost of it to us would just far outweigh the benefit of doing so, especially because of our belief in that.
How would you describe the...
I was going to say, has there been any progress, Kyle, on Rasmus Sandin's front?
I think we'll get back to Louis Gross and Rasmus here in the coming days. Our focus has been here now, but I don't think it's all too complex a situation.
How would you describe the conversations that you had with Jack in the negotiating process? He's been so upfront about his love for this city and this fan base and everything.
Yeah, he and I talked on Saturday, and then we've exchanged texts and calls here today, and we'll talk later tonight. But obviously he came in here at a time when we really desperately needed. Fred was injured, and he came in from LA. His year to that point in LA was not has not going as well for him, and they were going to bring Cal Peterson in. And so he came in here at a time where we really needed him, and was outstanding for us. And then obviously everyone has watched the subsequent years since, right, where he's kind of taken over, and you see how much he cares about the team and the city and his teammates, but also the level of accountability, which you would all see every time he was on Zoom, and then now we're back here, that he takes every single night, and you certainly appreciate that, and you never forget that type of stuff. But in the end, you have to make decisions that are best, you think, for the future of the team, regardless of what you think about the person personally.
Does the thing stand with Pierre Engvall as well?
We qualified him, so it'll come to a solution. I don't think that one's as complex either, and Claude Lemieux and Brandon have talked a lot about it. It'll be an arbitration settlement at worst, or an arbitration award at worst, but hopefully we can get it done before that.
Does it plan to keep John at center, or do you see maybe looking for
I think John, to me, until I don't see signs right now that he needs to move over. If we have someone that's a good enough center, obviously I don't think anyone's going to replace Austin in that role, but if there's somebody there that it makes sense to shift John over, or have another center that comes in that has to shift over themselves to play with Austin or John, I think anything that makes our team better we'll look at.
Would you look at moving Mitch in the middle?
It's not anything that's ever come up. I don't know that we want to. Mitch has been a first team All-Star right wing the last 2 years, so we got enough things to worry about rather than that stuff.
What sort of defenseman are you looking for? Are you looking more for that Labushkin kind of physicality, or what are you looking at?
Yeah, there's preferably a right shot with some physicality and some competitiveness. That would size and strength. That would be what we look for, Martin.
Having signed Hildeby, how excited are you to see him at the Digo camp?
Great. We would have been excited to see him regardless, but having that done and having him sign now makes it just a little bit more clear. It was the Newport Sports represents him, and they were excellent to deal with right after the draft. Obviously, he's a little bit older, so getting that one done and getting that developmental track moving a little bit quicker would be great. He's got by rights, we have to send him back to Fardestad next year, but we'll see how it goes in development camp and where he stands in the order. It's a little bit different a prospect because of the age. So, but we're quite excited about him. It's been a bit of an unorthodox path, but be excited to have him come in here.
Is the door still open for someone like Kasha, depending on how things kind of shake out?
Yeah, door's still open for sure. We loved having him here, and I mean, I think it was a good year for him as well. And so whatever, we'll see how things shake out here in the next day or so, and if it can work out, then that'd be great.
Do you think Rasmus could be an option as a right side defender moving forward here, or?
The more versatility we can have, the better, Mark. So I mean, I like him on the left. He's a left shot, and I mean we have the guys there. But between, as I think I said, maybe it was a week ago now when we were in Montreal before the draft. I mean, for us, Timothy and Rasmus continuing to develop in their spots is going to be key in the next number of years as some of our other guys continue to age a little bit. We need those guys to take on more minutes, more responsibility, and really be the future of the group on defense for us.
You can look into banning Edmonds and other scouts from the test.
That's just the way it goes sometimes. I mean, it's great for them. They'll be the two guys that have gone there in the last 2 years have been great people and players for us. So I mean, I'm happy for them, and was happy to see the success for them this season. But that's sometimes just the way it goes, coincidentally. But I don't think we'll be banning anybody yet. Thanks.
All right, so there is Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some good information there. We'll see what else he's got in store going forward, because got to tell you, Dave, I look at the roster, even with the additions of Jordie, Benn, or Mete, and then Samsonov, the goalie tandem. I'm still not sold that this is a Stanley Cup caliber team. Like I'm not sure this team got necessarily better than they were in Game 7 of Round 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But there's still a lot of time left. And as Kyle said, there's still some cap space and some moves that he intends on making. Hopefully they're of the bigger variety to what we've seen so far. That will do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. That will do it for us today. We'll be back with another episode on Monday. Enjoy your weekend, folks. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.